Hi, and welcome to What's New in Alfresco One, version 4.2. This video is part 3 of our 5-part series, where we're going to demonstrate some even more new features in Alfresco Share. I'm Gary Cox, and I'm a senior consultant with Bluefish Development Group, and I'll be presenting this video today. Part 2 of our series demonstrated many new features in Alfresco Share, but we didn't have time for everything. So part 3 is going to extend that review and cover some additional features. Mainly, we'll cover hybrid workflow, folder templates, and the more granular control over permissions that are now available. The first topic we're going to cover is the new hybrid workflow. So we'll have an introduction to hybrid workflow, and we'll start workflows on-premise and continue in the cloud. We'll do a simple cloud task, and then we'll start a cloud review task. Okay, here we are in my demo environment. This is a typical on-premise Alfresco 4.2 instance. Before we move on, I should kind of talk through a little bit what it really means to be a hybrid workflow. A typical workflow, when you start it and run it, all of the tasks are within the workflow engine on-premise, and the assignees are all users within the on-premise Alfresco instance. However, with hybrid workflow, you're initiating the workflow on-premise, but notifying the workflow engine in the cloud and continuing the workflow in the cloud instance. So this brings up a couple of additional layers of complexity. One is you need to provide access to the content you want reviewed in the cloud. A cloud user won't have access to your content on-premise. So when you actually launch a cloud workflow, you make decisions about how you want that content synchronized. And we'll walk through that when I launch the workflow. The second thing is, instead of just having an assignee, you also need to determine what network you want to actually launch the workflow in and what destination folder you want to sync content with. Now, you may only have one network that you have rights to, but if you have more than one, you can choose where you want to replicate to. So let's take a look at the cloud workflow. I'm going to start a workflow here, and I've enabled cloud workflows in my environment here. So now when I try to launch a workflow, I'll see a cloud task or review. So let's choose that one. And this looks a lot like a normal workflow screen, except that you have two choices for type. You can do a simple cloud task or a cloud review task. So do a simple cloud task first, and then we'll go through the review task. You can see here, rather than just having an assignee, we also have we need to provide the network we want to connect to along with the site and folder. So I'm going to do that now. So I have a cloud destination folder that I want to sync with. Now that I've set that up, I can also choose my assignee, and I'm going to choose myself. Then once that's done, you have a couple of options for synchronizing the content. Again, we have to synchronize the content because the cloud user is not going to have access to your on-premise location. So the default is to keep content on cloud, but then remove the sync once the workflow is completed. However, you can keep content synced after the workflow is completed, or you can actually delete the content in the cloud once the workflow is completed, obviously removing the sync. So if you just want something to be available during the actual workflow process, this is a great option. You can synchronize the content out to the cloud. While the workflow is in flight, it'll be available. Once the workflow has been completed, the content goes away. The other option here is you can actually lock the on-premise content so it can't be modified while the workflow is in flight. This is really useful if you don't want any changes to your content while somebody's reviewing it in the workflow. So we're going to turn that on. Now I don't currently have any items in my workflow because I didn't launch this as an action from a document directly. So I'm going to just go ahead and add one. So I have a PDF that I want reviewed, and now I'm going to start the workflow. So the workflow has been launched. Before we move on, I want to make one quick note. If your user hasn't already logged into the cloud before, when you try to select a network, you'll get prompted with a login. This is only a one-time thing. Once you've provided credentials for the cloud, that user and credentials are aligned with the user on premise, and you should just come up with a network screen once that's available. But the first time you'd need to log in to the cloud. So go ahead and close that. Now let's move over to my cloud instance. You can see here, I'm going to refresh this real quick. You can see I've been assigned a task. So if I take a look at that, I can see I've been assigned a document. But let's go take a look at that document. You can see that this is synchronized with the cloud. This is a cloud destination folder, not my on-premise. So my cloud user is looking at the cloud synced document, not the on-premise document. Back here, if I go into my on-premise site, you can see the document has been locked. So while the workflow is running, the document will be in a locked state. So I'm going to go ahead and approve this on my side, on the cloud side. So let's just say completed, approved, keep it short and sweet here, and we're done. So they have no more tasks, it's gone. If I go into cloud testing, the content is still there, right? But that's because it's not, the workflow hasn't been completed yet. The task has gone back to the on-premise user for completion. So let's go see. So I need to verify the task was completed. So I'm going to go and look in here, completed, task done. Task is gone now. I have no more active tasks. So the workflow is truly finished now. And now that the workflow is done, the synced up content has been deleted because that's the option I chose. On the on-premise Alfresco side, if I look at this document, you can see it's been now it's been unlocked. So because I chose to link the document and delete it once it was done, that's what happened when the workflow was completed. But again, you can choose to not lock it on the on-premise side and leave it in the cloud if you want to. But for this demonstration, we chose to delete it. So that's a simple task. Now let's go on and do the review task. Okay, we're back in my dashboard, and now we're going to do a demonstration of the review task workflow in the cloud. This time, rather than starting the workflow from my tasks dashlet, I'm going to go into a document and start it from a document action. So I've got a board game JPEG here for Takanoko, and I'm going to put it on a workflow. And when you launch it from document actions, you automatically have the document added as one of the items. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. Instead of a simple cloud task, I'm going to do a cloud review task. Many steps are similar. You still need to select a synchronization destination, so we're going to do that. So I have a folder I created. And then my reviewers, I'm just going to pick 2 reviewers. And I'm going to choose the approval percentage that's required. And I'm going to say 100%, so both reviewers have to approve the workflow. Now, in the first example, I had the content deleted in the cloud after the workflow completed. This time I'm going to have it remain, but break synchronization, turn it off basically. So it remains in the cloud, but it's no longer synchronized. And I'm also going to not lock the content when I start it on premise. So we'll start the workflow now. If I go back to, this is the on-premise site, you can see synchronization has been initiated. We're on a workflow. So synchronization has occurred, a workflow has been started. So I go to my other user. You see they've gotten the task. I'll say completed and approve. So that's been completed by this user. Now my other user should have a task as well, because it takes both of them were assigned the task. So this is my other user. You can see it's a different name. And they have the task now also. Now both of them actually went in parallel, so it didn't matter what order they looked at this task, but they both received the task at the same time in parallel. But he'll review it also. And approve. So that task is gone. Now, once this happens, in this particular workflow, we're gonna leave basically the content on the cloud this time. So we should go back and look, and take a look and see. So the content is still here. Now it's still synchronized. Let's go back here. This is the on-premise version of the document. And I've gotten the task back as the initiator. I've gotten the task back to complete. So if I go to my tasks here, you can see it's come back to me. So the workflow is still in flight. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. I can come down here and see the required percentage of approval was 100. The actual percentage was 100. These are my approvers. And I can just complete the task. And this is on the on-premise side. So now the task is done. It may take a couple of minutes for everything to update, but we should see that synchronization is gone. Now it actually already is gone. So this is no longer synchronized with the cloud. And here, this still shows synchronized, but in a couple of moments it'll get updated and synchronization will be turned off. So I did a quick pause of the video. Let's go back into the folder now. And you can see in the cloud the synchronization has been turned off. That was probably about 2 minutes before it was updated. But now this version of the document is no longer synchronized with the on-premise version. And again, you can choose to leave it synchronized if needed, but those three options are there. You can delete it, leave it, but turn off synchronization, or choose to leave it synchronized. In this case, we've left the content, but turned off synchronization. So that's really it for the workflow demonstration. This can be a pretty powerful way to have approval of tasks and so forth if you have users in the cloud that actually need to look at workflows. So we'll move on to the other two topics for the share demonstrations. The next new feature we want to demonstrate today are folder templates. This is something that's been added to 4.2 for Alfresco Share. And basically you can set up a folder structure of folders, subfolders, and even nested documents, and then use that as a template wherever it's needed to quickly create a whole structure within your site. The way to set that up is to go into repository, and then under data dictionary go into space templates. There's one sort of out of the box already called software engineering project, and if you go into that, you can see that there's several different subfolders. In addition, as a demonstration, I've added my own document into this structure. Once you've added a folder and any subfolders to the space templates, you can actually use the parent folder as a template pointer, and it will be created in your site from that template, and that would include all of the nested subfolders and documents. So we're going to demonstrate that real quick in our test site. So I'm in my test site, and I'm at the root under document library, and I want to, let's say I had created a new site and I was wanted to create quickly create an entire structure in my site of folders. So if you set that up as a space template, you can actually go to create folder from template, And you can see the software engineering project, which is there out of the box, is ready for you to use as a template. And again, I added a document this as an example, just to show that documents and folders can be part of a template. So let's go ahead and create this. And I'm just going to rename it real quick to my software engineering project. And then I'm going to hit save. And the folder will be created. And you can see not only is that folder created, but all of the children that are part of the template are created as well. So you can go to documentation. Underneath documentation, there's several folders, and then you can see as well my PDF got created as well as part of the template. So if you have a common set of folder structures that you use across sites, this can be a really easy way to set up a structure that can be reused very quickly. And you can, of course, have multiple templates as needed. So this is a neat new feature in Alfresco 4.2. The last feature we're going to cover today in this video is a discussion about the new view of permissions in Alfresco Share sites. In Alfresco 4.2, the permission view looks much more like the view from the repository than it did in previous versions of Alfresco. Before 4.2, when you were modifying permissions from a site, you were somewhat limited on what you could change, and you had to go up to repository and view the permissions from there to do some of the more granular settings. With 4.2, they've changed that, so now if you're in a site, which we are right now, we're in test, and go to the folder and want to change permissions, the view that you get is very similar to what you would have gotten if you went through the repository view. So now you can actually more granularly set permissions. You can see here test folder is right under document library, and it's set to inherit permissions, and so the standard internal groups are inherited from the parent. Also note that in some older versions of Alfresco, the view of these group names was not expanded properly, and now this is resolved in 4.2. You can override and add new groups if needed to set locally. And you can turn off inherent permissions if needed. So you really have more granular and full control from the site view of permissions. So it's nice that this has been added to 4.2. It makes managing permissions much more consistent, because before there were two different views depending on whether you went through repository or through the site directly. So this is a nice new feature to have in Alfresco. Thanks for joining us today. Please stay tuned for part 4 of this series, where we'll focus the entire video on discussing the new version of records management. And if you like the videos on our channel, subscribe to us. We're at Bluefish TX.